Vampire Weekend might be the biggest band you've ever heard who never had a hit single. They're one of the only bands in history to land 3 #1 albums without ever touching the Billboard Hot 100. Not Harmony Hall, not Diane Young, not even A-Punk. Their most recognizable song featured in movies, TV shows, and video games, and still never cracked the chart. The closest they've ever come, number 2, on the Bubbling Under chart. That's basically number 102. Even their peers, Arcade Fire, Death Cab for Cutie, Portugal the Man, all had at least one breakout moment. Vampire Weekend never did. The only other band to pull off this exact paradox is Slipknot. Which only makes this whole thing weirder. So how does something like this happen? And what does it say about album-first artistry versus the power of a hit single? Because in an industry built to reward hits, Vampire Weekend are quietly building something different. In the North American music industry, there are 2 charts that matter. The Billboard 200 ranks albums, who's moving full records week after week, and the Hot 100 tracks singles, the songs dominating streaming, radio, and TikTok in real time. Most major artists aim for both. Some manage to dominate both. Coldplay, for example, have 5 #1 albums and dozens of Hot 100 hits. They've built a career across every format, radio, festivals, playlists, with albums and singles landing every time.
But that was when I ruled the world.
Imagine Dragons, on the other hand, lean harder on singles. Just 1 #1 album, but nearly 20 Hot 100 entries. Radioactive alone spent 87 weeks on the chart, one of the longest runs in Billboard history. Radioactive! Their albums show up, but their singles are what stick around. Vampire Weekend, though, they live in a completely different lane. They're not built for top 40. Could you imagine M79 on the radio? They're an indie band with a smaller footprint, and yet their albums chart like they're Coldplay. That's not supposed to happen, especially without a hit single pushing it. Even the most critically beloved artists usually break through eventually. Radiohead charted 3 times, despite being one of the most influential album bands of this generation. Arcade Fire barely snuck in with Reflector, which peaked at number 99 for a single week. And Jack White? His chart appearances came while riding shotgun, with Alicia Keys or Beyonce doing the heavy lifting. Vampire Weekend never touched the Hot 100. Not once. No flukes, no collabs, no viral moments, just albums. And an audience that keeps showing up. Because the truth is, these charts are measuring 2 very different things. The Hot 100 reflects what's loudest, what's being playlisted, looped, and shared right now. The Billboard 200 reflects something quieter. Who's pressing play on the full thing? Who's willing to live with an album and not just a track? So when a band lands 3 #1 albums without a single charting hit, it's not just an anomaly. It's telling you something about the audience. It's a different kind of fan, one who buys the whole record and listens all the way through. And that kind of engagement is increasingly rare. In a landscape built for skipping, sampling, and shortening, full-length albums can feel almost rebellious. Most records today are designed around moments, not stories. Singles drive everything. But Vampire Weekend have distanced themselves from that game. While the industry has been optimizing for speed, they've been building something else entirely.
Look, my number 1 favorite thing, I love music like everybody, but if I had to define my specific way in, some people, they get into music through live music. Some people, they get into it because they love like singles. I've always been interested in discographies before I even read about the history of the band.
Yeah.
Because that's the story, that's the form I'm interested in.
For Vampire Weekend, albums have never been a delivery system for hits. They've been the whole point. In a moment where artists are encouraged to front-load their albums with potential hits and ride TikTok waves, Vampire Weekend move in the opposite direction. They don't build albums around songs, they build songs around ideas. And those ideas almost always begin with a title.
It's a great title as well, Father of the Bride. When did you come up with that, and what is the sort of
It was very
relationship?
early on.
Yeah.
I always do better when I know the album title. It's the same thing with Modern Vampires, same thing with Contra. it's always kind of nice to lock the name in early, because then there are ways that, I don't know, maybe gives you ideas for lyrics or helps you just kind of see the way everything's contextualized. So that's always been the case, at least with the past few albums.
And on the most basic, stupid level, it just sounded like a Vampire Weekend album title. Modern Vampires of the City. Like it almost just seems like a description of the album. You think it could be an idea, but you still have to prove it to yourself. And then by the end, when you have the title, the font, the cover, the songs, the lyrics, the production, the ideas, does it all work together? And then we started to feel really strongly that yes, it did.
That title in the back of their minds becomes a kind of thematic compass, guiding the mood and shape of everything that follows. And once that compass is set, the standard becomes simple. Every track has to earn its place.
The one thing you can always try to rely on is this idea of quality control. And we've always believed that we can never settle for something that's good. The rest of the world can think whatever they want, but for us, we have to really believe that every song we put on the record, there's something really special about it, and we feel really strongly. At some point, every track has been my favorite, and I think that's an important part of making an album. That's kind of what it lets you know that you're on the right track.
I think we realized that there's no easy way to arrive at having 12 songs that you're very proud of. There's no shortcuts that can be taken. You just have to write and write and write and rewrite and revise and be hard on yourselves. And I think that's what, hopefully that's what we'll always do.
Since Modern Vampires, Vampire Weekend have done something almost no one else in music does anymore. They dropped double lead singles. Not one big track to anchor the album, but two equally weighted songs, released at the same time. One rowdy, one restrained. One loud, one intimate. Each pair acts as an emotional preview, clues to the album's full range. And yes, this move likely hurts their streaming numbers. It's why so few artists today even bother to try it. Two lead singles split attention, weaken the algorithmic boost, and make it harder for either one track to stick. They're not avoiding hits, they just don't build around them. What Vampire Weekend are doing is setting a tone. And that only works if you know your fans are listening to the whole thing. It's a strategy that absolutely makes no sense unless the album's the point. And for Vampire Weekend, it always has been.
That's when it gets scary, and I think that's stressful for artists, is when people just do not tolerate anything different. Anybody who's been with Vampire Weekend for the first 3 albums knows that they are actually looking for us to change on each album. They're interested in the journey.
Right.
So it's like a tightrope walk, to be a little different, but also you got to sound like yourself.
Building something that lasts means letting it change. Plenty of artists debut with a signature sound and spend the rest of their careers either repeating it or reacting against it. But Vampire Weekend have evolved album by album, musically, emotionally, and philosophically. Their debut was bright, playful, and deceptively sharp. Indie pop meets Afrobeat. Columbia kids writing clever songs about grammar, privilege, and class anxiety.
Gives a fuck about an Oxford comma. I seen those English dramas too. They're cruel.
It was catchy enough to soundtrack dorm parties and layered enough to outlive them. But even then, Ezra was thinking about what came next.
It was the perfect first album for us, but, it was also so kind of youthful and collegiate and kind of like cheery, and it always felt like such a great starting point. But yeah, I was anxious to show like different shades of the band.
If their debut was confident, Contra was conflicted. Restless and experimental, it layered digital textures, tropical synths, and existential unease.
Big sides, never choose between two, but I just wanted you.
An album about growing up, questioning everything, and trying to feel sincere in a world that feels anything but. And it was written fast, under the pressure of their breakout debut.
Oh yeah, of course. I was like kind of classic, like overthinking, neurotic person, worried about like, oh God, what if this all goes away, whatever. And I was obsessed with the idea that our first album was 2008, Contra's got to be 2009. Looking back, like, who cares? But whatever, that was important. And then at the last minute, the label's like, how about January 2010? I just remember being like, oh my God.
By album 3, they had slowed down and zoomed out. Modern Vampires of the City traded jittery guitars for Baroque pop, spiritual doubt, and meditations on mortality. It was their most cohesive and critically adored record, and in some ways, the end of an era.
We didn't know for sure that these albums would feel like a trilogy until we finished them, but it does feel like maybe the end of some kind of era. But, we're excited. We kind of feel like we can do whatever we want with our next album. So, just have to wait and see.
What followed was the longest gap in their career. The band stepped back and their pace slowed dramatically. What took 6 years for their first 3 albums stretched into 5 years for just one. In today's music economy, 5 years between records isn't just unusual, it's almost unthinkable. Most bands can't afford to disappear for that long. But after 3 major successes, Vampire Weekend had earned the luxury of that kind of time.
To me, 5 years between records feels good and appropriate. I don't know how people do a record once a year, every 2 years.
I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
we had a stretch where we did that.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, right.
We had to make
Yeah.
hay while the sun shone. And also, like when you're in your 20s, it makes
It's
sense.
a different
game.
But anyway, yeah, sometimes it just takes a long time to kind of see what a song can be.
When they returned in 2019, it was with Father of the Bride, their longest, loosest, most divisive record yet. A sprawling double album of sunshine pop, soft psychedelia, and folk rock duets. It featured guests for the first time, and a broader sonic palette.
Right place, wrong time. Another night at the bar, another night in the sway of the flower moon.
Some called it bloated, while others called it mature.
That was our big, wide genre experimentation. Guests for the first time, like proper guests, and you're hearing Danielle's voice, and you're hearing Steve Lacy's voice, and you're getting this kind of like amazing mix of producers and collaborators. And it's 18 tracks. It's our double album. And then it's like, after that, I don't want to make a triple album. I want to make a 10-song focused album. And that feels right for now.
That 10-song album became Only God Was Above Us, their densest, most sonically complex record to date. Surreal, orchestral, and psychedelic. A record about broken systems, lost meaning, and finding beauty in the noise.
The crew with time becomes classical.
I can't always fully explain it, but I just feel like different number albums have a different flavor. And even with dramatically different artists, they roughly can represent something. Our first album is so first album-y. Contra is a classic second album. Modern Vampire is a classic third album. Father of the Bride is a classic fourth album. And this one has just 5 written all over it without going all the way into the Bible code, into the Da Vinci Code. First album or 2, you introduced yourself. Somewhere in the middle, maybe you added a new element. Maybe you pushed off against something. Maybe you explored new territory. Regardless, by the time you get to your 5th album, you've already made a statement or 2 or 3, and you've probably already made a counter statement or something. It gets to be a very legitimate question, which is like, why are we still doing this? What do we have to say? Do we have something to say lyrically, production-wise? Because of the best albums, all these things speak together. The playing, the production, the sound, the words, it all goes together.
Only God Was Above Us debuted at number 27, and then disappeared from the chart a week later. Commercially, it barely registered. But critically, it was their highest rated album in a decade. While it charted lower than anything since their debut, critics hailed it as a return to form. Some called it their best work, period. It didn't go viral, but that was never the goal. It wasn't designed to peak. It was made to endure. And even now, as the album quietly moves through the world, Ezra's already thinking ahead.
As we've rolled this album out, of course, what am I obsessively thinking about? Albums 6 and 7. I have my mood boards.
That's kind of cool, though. That's nice. There's a lineage going forward.
And I realize that's what I like. You get thrust into an industry. This is true of any job. And maybe at first you're excited about it. And then you have to realize, well, what do I really like about this?
They don't release music to stay relevant. They release it when it's ready. And in between, they disappear. On purpose.
And then I started to realize that I've always been so interested in people who take serious time off, or people who kind of disappear for a while.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, those are like the most inspirational stories, because sometimes they come back and do great work, like Leonard Cohen, and then sometimes they don't. And even that's kind of cool. I find that inspiring too. Just to know that it's possible. Then I've also realized, whether you take 6, 5 years between records, whatever, once the record's out, it's as if the time vanishes anyway, so you might as well make it good.
For Vampire Weekend, it was never about staying hot. It was about being good. being honest and staying in control of the work, not chasing the moment, but making sure the next chapter was worth writing.
So there's times I thought, oh, maybe I don't want to do the band anymore. Maybe it makes more sense as a solo project. Maybe it makes sense to start something else. But ultimately what I've come back to is that I've had such strong feelings about how each album represents a chapter. And no matter who I'm working with or what it sounds like, I ultimately decided that's something that I love too much to kind of let go of.
From the start, Vampire Weekend were thinking in chapters, not singles. They never chased a viral hit or shaped themselves to fit the moment. They built a discography, strange, spiritual, sun-drenched, literary, and meant to last.
I always had a sense of where Vampire Weekend might head. I was always excited because we were starting a story, and I knew that there were going to be like subsequent chapters. And in some ways, that's why I wanted to be a musician, because I just grew up loving, for lack of a better word, discographies.
You wanted to be prolific.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say prolific because I'm extremely slow, but I like the idea of how records work together. And, when I think about the music that we've made since then, I don't think, wow, that was a totally different time. It feels very connected.
In an industry that rewards speed, content, and spikes, they chose patience, cohesion, and longevity. They're not building for the chart. They're building for the fan who returns 5 years later, who plays the whole record, looking for a world to live in. They never needed the moment because they're building something that can outlast it. There's kind of something rare about artists who don't just make music, but build a whole world or mythology around it, intentionally or not. You can see that same sort of tension between art and the stories around them in a film like Pavements. It starts out as a documentary about the indie band Pavement getting back together for a reunion tour, but morphs into a fake biopic starring Joe Keery of Stranger Things, mixed with a full-on stage musical based on their songs, and even a museum exhibit that somehow becomes a part of the story. It's absolutely wild, a little surreal, and surprisingly sincere, especially if you've ever watched your favorite indie band turn into something of a brand. Pavements is streaming now, exclusively on MUBI, a platform that curates films the way Vampire Weekend makes albums, carefully, cohesively, and entirely on their own terms. You can try it free for 30 days at mubi.com/middle8. I'll put that link down below. 1 full month of absolute cinema, totally free. Thanks to MUBI for supporting the channel, and for backing films that actually try something different. Thanks for watching, ladies and gents. Tell me, what's your favorite Vampire Weekend album? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more videos on music, and keep listening to Vampire Weekend.